Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of A Proud Malcontent on this Wednesday, the 8th of October. I am Pete Bell, and I am a proud malcontent. Right, what have you got for you today? Well, I tell you what, first of all, I have to apologise to anybody who was misled because I originally scheduled this for 1 o'clock today instead of 2 o'clock. I just get confused. Clocks, calendars, yeah, all that stuff just confuses me. So bear with me, folks. Other than that, right, let's think now. Let's get the rubbish out of the way first, shall we? Aye. Here comes the rubbish. A fresh start. John Swinney unveils new Scottish independence plans. Well, no, he doesn't. There's no independence plan there. What he's given us is just another glossy brochure, another piece of sales material telling us what a wonderful destination independence is. But if you check the small print, you'll find out that you'll discover that there's no departure date because they still haven't figured out how to get us there. So it's not a plan for independence, it's a plan for being independent. Swinney has no idea how we're going to become independent. So anybody who's expecting him to actually do that, to restore our independence, is going to be sorely disappointed. So yeah, take your new plans and piss off, John. Yeah, heard enough of that. There's another one which is slightly more interesting in a way. Down here, John Swinney. Devolution has reached its limits, and UK government holds Scotland back. Well, yeah, okay. It's no secret that the UK government holds Scotland back. That's that's been fairly obvious for a long time. But so is the fact that devolution is dead. Devolution died years ago. Devolution probably died in 2007 when Alex Salmond formed the first SNP government. If it didn't die in 2007, it was certainly diagnosed as terminal then by Dr. Britannia. 2011 probably sealed the deal, and devolution was dead because the British state had decided to kill it. It wasn't going any further. It had already gone too far. It was considered to be a failed experiment. So it's dead, but it was dead a long time ago. It would have been finished completely by now, but for the fact that the British state found ways of weaponizing devolution. They found ways of giving the Scottish government more responsibility while withholding more authority. So that they set all sorts of political and fiscal traps for the Scottish government. So that was all intended to force the Scottish government into making unpopular cuts or putting in place unpopular policies, just to force them into that, so that the Scottish government would become unpopular, and to bring the Scottish Parliament into disrepute. So that eventually it all leads to the British state locking Scotland into a reformed union, modernised. They're going to modernise it so as we can't get out. That's the eventual plan. So that's two small pieces of nonsense from John Swinney. that I had to look at today. There was one other thing. I was advised, or I was prompted to go and look at Gordon Ross, go and watch Gordon Ross's latest video. You probably know Gordon Ross better as IndyCar Gordon. So I was prompted to go and look at his video on YouTube, his latest edition. Because there was, I was told there would be some things in there that would interest me. Now, I don't regularly watch Gordon's show, but I do from time to time, and I was prompted to this time, and prompted by that video to reply to some of the points that he made. He's much more tidy about his show than I am about mine. He divides it into sections, and he finishes one section before he goes on to the next, and he kind of knows where he's going and what he's doing. I might get there eventually, but for the moment, you'll just have to put up with this shambles. Yeah, so if you want to go and take a look at Gordon Ross's YouTube, by all means do. I'll put a link to it in the references when I get this online on Substack. I'll put a link to it in the references, so you'll have no trouble finding it. What's the main one today? The main one today is my what should be my latest post on Substack. My latest, yes, there it is. I was I was hoping that it had been published, because I used the scheduler on Substack this time. I wasn't entirely sure it was going to work, but there it is, good old Substack. And I think I'll probably read this whole thing, because it started, as I point out at the top of the article, it started as a response to a comment on an earlier post. And excuse me a moment. I just a wee drink water while I'm on here. It was a response to a comment on an earlier post, and as often happens, writing about something prompts me to think about the subject more, or it prompts me to think about some aspect of it, and to think about it in new ways. And sometimes new thoughts occur to me as I'm writing. So it may seem a bit stream of consciousness, because that's kind of what it is. Because sometimes I write what I think, and sometimes I write to discover what I think. It's by writing about something that I'm mulling it over in my mind, examining it, turning it over, turning it around, questioning it all the time. And so writing about it helps me to think about it and clarify in my own mind what my point of view is. So I'll read it out, and then we'll maybe have some more to say about it. I remember you can comment if you're on Facebook or YouTube. I know the comments work, but I don't always see them, because I'm sometimes occupied with something else. So I don't always see the comments, but and some of them I can't respond to. The restream doesn't cover all of them for responding to, but I try to after the show. I go on and I try to respond to comments that call for a response. I'm not one of those aloof bloggers. I like to engage with my audience. The comments section on my actual blog has always been arguably the most interesting part of the whole thing, because uh, I am fortunate and that I have quite a few followers who make pertinent comments and who examine things, and who they may perhaps disagree with me, but they're able to explain why they disagree with me. So the conversations, the exchanges on the comments section are well worth taking a look at. Of course, they all depend on me prompting the discussion by the articles that I write. So I'm not entirely redundant in this process. Okay. Right, back to that thing that I posted today. And remember, I said it was a response to a comment. It'll be self-explanatory, I hope. Another 5 wasted years is close to being unavoidable already. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the fractiousness within the independence movement, which nobody in the wider population even notices. The problem is not the squabbling, but the fact that the vast majority are squabbling about entirely the wrong things. Most of the disputes boil down to arguments about where to place your votes. In other words, they are arguments about who to vote for. Almost nobody is considering what they're voting for. Look at Liberate Scotland, for example. And I'm not picking on Liberate Scotland, it just happens to be an example. They insist you should vote for them, which makes them no different than any other party. Their supporters insist you should vote for them. Then somebody says, no, you should vote for Alapa. Then the ding dong starts, and it goes on and on and on, and it never gets beyond, excuse me, it never gets beyond being an argument about who to vote for. Both make remarkably similar claims that they are the party to vote for if you want independence. Both claim a vote for them is a vote for independence. Both shout independence all the time and work the idea of independence into a few slogans, into a slew of slogans. But the argument never gets beyond the superficial level of who. The argument never grows up to be a mature debate about what. Nobody, or precious few people, actually attempt to scrutinise the what of the party's offering. There's the party's name and its logo and its slogans and nothing else. Nothing. No substance whatever. The space where the what should be is left empty. It's left empty in some cases, such as Liberate Scotland, because the people involved have nothing with which to fill it. They haven't thought beyond the party's name and logo and slogans. They pick a name, logo, and slogans, thinking they will attract people. And they're right. People are lured in by the word liberate and the flag in fist logo and sloganeering about unity. Since luring people is all they're interested in, the job is done as far as the founders of the party are concerned. There's no motivation to fill the what space. There's no need, and filling it is hard, so they don't do it. In other cases, and probably to some extent in all cases, the what space is left vacant quite deliberately, because when that space is empty, people will tend to fill it with whatever it is that they prioritize. They'll fill it with their own agenda. So the party becomes all things to all people, which suits the party hierarchy because all they want is votes. Meanwhile, back at the squabbling, the warring tribes get to say whatever they want about what their party stands for and whatever they want about what the other party stands for. Both claim to be everything that's good. Both are accused of being everything that is bad. The what space being undefined, it can be defined and redefined at any time in whatever way is expedient. Mostly, it is defined as bad because it is easier to accuse others than it is to define the what of your own tribe, because there is no what. Contrast all this with the idea of behind the New Scotland Party. With the New Scotland Party, the what came first. The what is Scottish UDI and the Manifesto for Independence. And the whole new mindset that these ideas arise from. The who of NSP came later. The who only came into being because the what was already there. And it was thought that the message about the what could better be carried if there was a who in the form of a political party. But a political party that studiously avoids the squabbling about who by staying out of the electoral arena, at least temporarily. New Scotland Party started because there needed to be an example of a party that had a what, a party that put the what first, a party for which the what was the only thing that matters. This is as all political parties should be. This is as all political parties are meant to be. They are meant to have a core of ideas and principles and not merely a shell of slick marketing material. I trust everybody understands what I what I mean by that, and I very rarely talk about the New Scotland Party, simply because it's not really relevant to the what. As I say, the what existed first. The New Scotland Party was devised as an add-on. We thought originally, or I thought originally, that we could develop the two together, that we could develop the Scottish UDI Manifesto for Independence plan and develop the party as well. I got it wrong. I freely admit when I got it wrong. It was not possible to do both at once. I certainly couldn't cope with it, and the amount of work that had to be done and the type of work that had to be done, I simply didn't have the volunteers for that. There were volunteers, and they did a good job. They took a lot of the weight, but simply didn't have the kind of volunteer people power that I needed to develop the party. So I quite casually set it to one side. Said no, the Scottish UDI aspect, the what, is a lot more important than the party. So we can set aside development of the party for the moment. Shall probably, almost certainly, return to it. If I seem hesitant about that or vague or ambivalent, it's because we never know what's in front of us. Right now, my life is being disrupted because I have leg ulcers, and they flare up occasionally, and it's flared up just now. So if you see me with a pained expression, it's because I'm in pain. But you see the point about the NSP, the New Scotland Party. It is the idea of what a party should be. If you think back to the old Labour Party, the original Labour Party, well, it was a socialist party. It had socialist principles at its core. And it had socialist ideas, such as the welfare state. Uh, I mean, you couldn't say that about it now, obviously, but British Labour was the way parties should be. It was founded. The what was there, and then the party was formed to carry forward that what, to campaign for it, and to implement it, to realise it. And I tried to do something similar with a New Scotland Party. As I say, the what was there several years before the party. And the what is the thing that's important. The what is the what is the Scottish UDI strategy. So, and that is the what that is missing from all the parties. I seem to be picking on Liberate Scotland there. I wasn't, because what I say about Liberate Scotland can equally be said about Alapa or any of the other parties, including the SNP, because as far as the constitutional issue is concerned, there is no what at the core of the SNP. There may be principles, there may be. I would certainly rate the SNP as more principled than British Labour, and pretty much anybody's more principled than the Tories and Reform UK, which I tend to lump together. Yeah, but what about ideas? There are no ideas. There's no strategic thinking whatsoever. I mean, look at John Swinney. Look what he did. He set out this supposed strategy for independence that depends on the SNP getting a majority of seats. It depends on replicating 2011. 2011 was a fluke. You cannot engineer a fluke. By definition, a fluke is something that just happens. It's not engineered. Nobody made 2011 happen. It was just a combination of things that happened to come together to produce that result. An SNP majority government, an SNP parliamentary majority. The whole system, the whole electoral system, is supposed to prevent that happening. It was designed to prevent any one party dominating the parliament. It was designed principally to avoid the parliament being strong. It was designed to keep the parliament fractious in some kind of balance, where there had to be coalitions, there had to be cooperation. So it was thought that nothing troublesome could emerge from that, nothing troublesome from the British state. Well, that changed in 2007. And as I say, that's probably when the death knell sounded for devolution. 2011 just put the cap on it, because 2011, everybody on the unionist side, the British state, that was a clincher for them. Devolution has to stop. And we have to hold back that tide as well as we can. And somebody came up with the idea of using devolution as a weapon, using it to try and entangle the Scottish government, and to draw the Scottish government in to absorb it, to own it. They've done that. They've done that very successfully. then the SNP just made it far too easy for them. So they pretty much own the Scottish government now, and what they don't own, they don't need to own. They can let John Knox rattle on about new independence plans forever. They're quite happy to let him rattle on about new independence plans and devolution having run its course, so long as he doesn't actually do anything about it. So long as there's nothing behind the rhetoric other than vote grabbing, other than electioneering, they're quite happy. They're quite happy to let him go, because the independence movement wouldn't die if you took John Swinney and the SNP out of the equation. The independence movement would still be there. So what the British state is concerned with is to ensure that a real national party doesn't emerge. It doesn't get a chance to emerge because the SNP stays dominant, and the SNP has been captured by the British state. So, I mean, Alf Bairds will explain this a little better than I can, but it is part of post-colonial theory that the national government will be colonized, will be totally colonized. The Parliament gets colonized, and the government gets colonized, and now and now it's secure. Sorry, it's secure. The British state feels quite safe with that. The arrangement that we've got, it's served them well for the last 10 years, 11 years. It's going to serve them well for another 5, because it looks almost certain now that there will be nothing will come out of the 2026 election for Scotland's cause. It looks very much as if it will be another 5 years of managed nationalism. Now, there's a term I've just coined. You'll have heard of managed democracy. That's in places like Singapore, where they have a kind of democracy, but it's very constrained. There's limits on it. There's things that we would recognise as democratic and other things not. And in the UK, we're getting very much to that stage as well. Becoming a managed democracy. And it just occurred to me that the same terminology would be apt for the kind of nationalism that we get from the SNP. Is managed nationalism. It's nationalism managed so that it doesn't get out of control from the colonizers' perspective, so that it doesn't become a threat, so that it doesn't jeopardize the union. That is what we have, managed nationalism. And somehow we have to break that. And we have to break it. We can't replace it. Well, possibly we can replace it, but it would take a lot of time, a hell of a long time. Excuse me. The polls. Best information we have. We know the polls are defective, because although the polls may quite accurately reflect what the people think, what public opinion is, what they don't gauge is the extent to which what people think is influenced by propaganda. The polls may be accurate, but what people think may not, may be very far from accurate. Look at the way Reform is pulling in votes, and it's because people believe all sorts of things that they like about Reform, and they just don't know about the bad aspects of it. I saw a Vox Pop on TV recently, or it might have been on Facebook, but whatever. It was a Vox Pop, and it was asking people about if they knew about certain policies of Reform UK, and they didn't. They hadn't a clue. These were people who were intending to vote Reform, and they hadn't a clue about various policies. Where was I? Yes, managed nationalism. Our nationalism has been managed, and we have to break it. Replacing it would simply take too long. It would be a lengthy process. The SNP, the polls are telling us, the SNP is going to be the next government. We're going to have the SNP for the next 5 years. Probably not a majority government. That's John Swinney's pipe dream. I don't know what the hell he was on when he came up with that one. But the Greens will probably, for a price, the Greens will support them. So it will be an SNP minority government with the support of the Greens, and depending on what deals are made at budget time, perhaps the support of some of the Lib Dems, or at least some of the Tories might abstain. If they're thrown a bone by whoever's in charge of the budget these days, it'll be that SNP government. So it'll be a continuation of managed nationalism, and my fear is that, and I don't know if this accords with post-colonial theory, but my fear is that this managed nationalism might become bedded in. It might become so secure that it becomes the only choice. There's nothing else. It becomes so secure and so dominating that nothing else can grow. The post-colonial theory, as I understand it, the process is that the National Party, which has been captured by the colonizer, fails and is replaced. I can't see any way the SNP can be replaced. Not by 2026. There's just the replacement isn't there. The alternative isn't there. There's no one there that can. There's no party there that can beat the SNP. Not because the SNP is wonderful, mainly because of two factors: voter inertia. The people who simply vote on the day and don't care about what's happening otherwise, and they see, things are no too bad with the SNP. Might as well give them another. People who are really no fuss, people who aren't anoraks like us, and I include you because you're watching this. So it's going to be the SNP supported by the Greens, and that means another 5 years of managed nationalism. And there's nobody there that can replace them. Nobody that can replace them in terms of electoral chances, electoral support. Alapa is nowhere near. Alapa's struggling to get into double figures. I don't think they've ever hit double figures, not in the national polls, not in polls for the Scottish general election. And the others, they're way behind Alapa. They're just just nowhere. And all right, electoral miracles can happen, flukes can happen, as in 2011. But like I said about 2011, flukes cannot be engineered. You can't set out to create a fluke. If it's something that can only happen as if it's a fluke, such as the SNP majority government in 2011, it can only happen as a fluke. John Swinney seems to think he can engineer it. He seems to think that at a time when the SNP is at its lowest ebb in terms of popularity, its lowest ebb since the 70s, probably. I mean, the polling, what's around 30% now? That's where they were in the 70s. Yeah? So they've gone backwards. I mean, they were what was it, 42% at one time, and more than that in 2015. It was the idea that they could that fluke could be engineered again, that it could be made to happen. It was pretty silly at the best of times, but at this time, it is just madness. It is utter madness. But it's all part of the managed. It's all part of the managed nationalism. This is John Swinney trying to get to ensure that the SNP stays in power, because that's what suits his party. It's also what suits the British state. So that it's going to be, that is what it's going to be. We have to assume that that's what it's going to be, because there isn't another credible scenario. There is no credible scenario in which some party suddenly rises, comes from nowhere, to hit 35, 40% in the polls, and actually threatens the SNP and actually becomes the government, a real nationalist party becoming the government. There is no credible scenario in which that happens. Not in 2026. And we must assume 2026 is our last chance. We must assume that every national democratic event is our last opportunity to initiate the process by which Scotland's independence will be restored. We need that political and parliamentary process. That is the only way it can be done. It can only be done through the Scottish Parliament. And it can only be done if we reclaim the Scottish Parliament, if we think of the Scottish Parliament as being our ancient Parliament, which was stolen from us in 1707, returned to us in 1999 in chains, the chains of devolution. So what we're looking to do is throw off those chains of devolution. We're looking to throw off the nation. We're also looking to throw off the Parliament. And the Parliament has to come first, because it is that Parliament which will pass the legislation which makes Scotland an independent country. It will pass the legislation, including a provision for an interim constitution and provision for a confirmatory referendum. That comes through the Scottish Parliament. There is no other body that can do it. It can't be done by anyone else. It can only be done by the Scottish Parliament. And it can only be done by the Scottish Parliament if the Scottish Parliament repossesses its powers over constitutional affairs. It has to assert its legislative competence in constitutional matters, because that is the only way it can acquire that competence. And only once it's acquired that competence can it can begin the process of restoring Scotland's independence. I've explained this before, how the first thing we need is not a vote for independence, but a vote that takes us to the vote for independence. Their problem at the moment is that we cannot access the means to exercise our right of self-determination. Sorry, I forgot to mute my phone. We cannot access it. Between the British state and the Scottish establishment, we are prevented from accessing that capacity, the capacity to exercise our right of self-determination in a proper constitutional referendum. So we have to access that first. That comes before independence. It has to come before independence. Although it has to be said that the Scottish Parliament asserting legislative competence in constitutional matters is a de facto declaration of independence. Because once you control constitutional matters, you control everything. Once the Scottish Parliament has legislative competence in the area of the Constitution, it can then pass legislation such as a bill to dissolve the Union. That's the way it goes. They don't go straight to independence. That's a politician's idea. It's a simplistic idea, because the explanation that I've just given of how we go about it, going first through the process of reclaiming and repossessing our parliament. For the politicians, that's too complicated. Voters are thick. They'll never explain, they'll never understand that. Besides, we can't really explain it because it's too complicated for us. So that's why they're not interested. But I'll guarantee that a large number of them, because they're not all stupid, a large number of them actually know that Scottish UDI is the only process. A lot of them in private, will actually admit that it will have to be some form of UDI, and they're right. What I'm suggesting is that if it has to be UDI, and it must, because there is no route to independence through the legal and constitutional framework of the British state, so it'll have to be some form of UDI. So I say, well, if it's got to be some form of UDI, let's be clever about it and do UDI in a way that gives us the advantage and puts the British state on the back foot. And we do that by making it a human rights issue, by making it about access to the right of self-determination. Do that first, before independence. We have no right to independence. In international law, we have no right to independence, but we have an absolute right to choose independence if we so wish. We have a right to make that choice, and we are being obstructed from making that choice by the Scottish Parliament, by the Scottish government, because they have to do it. Westminster can't do it. Westminster thinks it's blocking the process that will lead to restoration, because they've got that managed nationalism in place. They think that they're blocking it, but they couldn't block it unless the Scottish government was prepared to block it, because it's the Scottish government that actually does the blocking. Our route to independence depends on the Scottish government and the Scottish Parliament. It depends on our democratic institutions here in Scotland. It's an internal matter. It's entirely internal. It's nothing to do with Westminster, and they should have nothing to do with it. It's an internal matter, so it has to be our democratic institutions. There are people who say, oh, we'll need to set up whole new democratic institutions. I say there is no need. We already have them. We already have a Scottish government. We already have a Scottish parliament. We already have all the infrastructure there. The only problem is it has been hijacked by the British state, and the British state have put the SNP in charge of it, because the SNP is party of government and dominates the parliament. So they've got the managed nationalism that they want. That can drag on forever. In principle, it could go on forever, certainly for a lot of years. So replacing, how do you replace that? Well, you can, but it would have to be at an election, and it's not going to happen at the next election. Can we afford to wait for the next one? 2031. Can we afford to wait for that? I don't think so. Can we afford to wait another 5 years? Look what's happening to Scotland at the moment. We've been bled dry. We're being impoverished by the British state. The British state is a parasite, and it's sucking the lifeblood out of Scotland, and it will only get worse. They will have to keep sucking more and more out of Scotland in order to survive, because they've lost their way, and they've no idea how to be an independent nation. They're entirely dependent on Scotland, or if not entirely dependent, critically dependent. They're critically dependent on Scotland. So they have to have this managed nationalism in place. We don't have time to replace it. We don't have time, even if there was a replacement there. And there isn't. And not only because these other nominally pro-independence parties are having no success, but because those supposed alternative parties aren't an alternative. They're not different enough. They're not radical enough. If Alapa was radical enough, if Alapa adopted the Manifesto for Independence and took the approach of the Scottish UDI strategy, then Alapa would soar in the polls. It would soar. Because it would become that genuine alternative, that genuine national party to compete with the fake national party, the party of managed nationalism, not the party of independence. The SNP is the party of managed nationalism. If there was a real Scottish nationalist party, and do not be ashamed of that term, there's nothing wrong with it. If there was a real Scottish nationalist party, if Alapa were to become the real national party that is predicted by post-colonial theory, then there is that possibility that Alapa could replace the SNP. That is possible. If they move today, they'd have to kick Kenny McCaskill out. And that is no disrespect to Kenny. I just don't think he's the man to go down any kind of radical route. But they could adopt the Scottish UDI strategy today, the new leader, so that it's credible, that there's been this big change, big sweeping change. They would soar in the votes, in the polls, and genuinely soar, not soar in the way the National uses that term. No, they would genuinely soar. Their vote would double, treble, quadruple. They would go pretty much straight into the high teens, low 20s, I reckon. Yeah, that's just speculation, but I reckon that could happen if Alapa became, but that's a gamble. The other thing that would happen in that situation is that the SNP would see ALPA as a threat. This is a real National Party being a threat to the colonisers' National Party, the party of managed nationalism. And if they become a threat, if this radical independence party becomes a threat, then the SNP is going to be forced to have a rethink. If this new Scottish National Party, Scottish Nationalist Party, real Scottish Nationalist Party, if it's threatening the SNP's dominance, the SNP survival is going to have to change, is going to have to do something to tackle this competition. So there's the possibility that the SNP would change. That it would say, okay, time's up. We have to stop being the party of managed nationalism. We have to go back to being a real Scottish nationalist party. Another thing that could happen is SNP MSPs start defecting to this new nationalist party, this new Scottish nationalist party. Potentially enough of SNP MSPs defecting to this new party, which could be ALPA, enough of them defecting that the SNP ceases to dominate and ceases to be the party of government. That could happen, but it requires that at least one of the nominally pro-independence parties adopts a radical, practical, viable route to independence, a genuine route to independence, a process that actually leads to independence. And the only such process that has been identified to date is Scottish UDI. It's the one that I've identified. And I was able to identify it because I was only concerned about the what. We're going back to that. I was only concerned about the what. Just as some of the early social reformers weren't interested in becoming MPs. They simply wanted the reforms. They were thinking about the what. They were writing books about how housing should be and how industry should be. They were writing books about how healthcare should be and what women's rights should be. They were behind the scenes. They were creating the what. Then the British Labour Party, the original British Labour Party, was born so as to carry these ideas forward. But it needed these people, and I like to think of myself as like them, these early reformers, the ones that aren't interested in the who, not interested in getting elected office with all the rewards that go with it. I am not. I am interested only in the what. And the what, because my focus is the constitutional issue facing Scotland, the what is a strategy that actually takes us to independence. I have spent years thinking about that, and I've come to the conclusion that what I call Scottish UDI, that process, going by way of asserting legislative competence, effectively repossessing our parliament, going that route that I've described countless times, that is the only way, because any other route, the people say that they're describing the routes to independence, but independence isn't at the end of it. It stops somewhere short of independence or somewhere other than independence. So they're not really strategies for independence, not any more than the SNP's is. The SNP's so-called strategy is a strategy for asking for another Section 30 order. That's all it is. That's all that will come of it. So basically, nothing will come of it. But there is a possibility for that new nationalist party to arise. But given the shortage of time, it would be better if it was one of the existing parties, because I know how difficult it is to start a party. It'd be better if it was one of the existing parties. Alba looks like the best candidate, has for a long time, or it's the SNP. And that seems to me the most obvious solution, because if the polls are right, and they can't be as wrong as they would need to be, if the polls are right, we're going to be stuck with the SNP. We're going to be stuck with managed nationalism for the next 5 years if we do not change the SNP. SNP conference has started. That is when it should be changed. It looks unlikely. It looks very unlikely. It looks, even with the amendment or any part of the amendment that has been tabled, it looks like John Swinney's resolution, the leadership resolution, is going to go through pretty much intact. There'll be there might be some changes, there might be some concessions to the amendment. John Swinney might accept the all parties instead of just the SNP part of it, because that gets him out of the hole that he dug for himself with the SNP only strategy that he so inexplicably went for. But it's going to be the same. It's going to end up the same way. It's going to end up at another Section 30 request. It's not going to end independence. There is no strategy there for restoring independence, no plan, no intention, no will. So it's another 5 years unless somebody does something radical. And that has to be either somebody in the SNP or somebody in ALPA. That's the only two ways it can go. And the only strategy that they can adopt to become radical, the real nationalist party, is Scottish UDI. Because no other strategy exists. No other strategy has been identified. The people claim to have identified strategies, but they always get lost at some of the what next questions. The final what next question should be answered by the one word, independence. But when you ask what next questions are all along the lines of these supposed routes to independence, there comes a point where you ask what next, and it's not independence. It's gone off somewhere else. It's a convention or a committee to discuss this and that. It's pretty much anything, but not actual independence. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for either ALPA to become the radical nationalist party that we need, or we're looking for a wee rebellion in the SNP so that it becomes the real national party and not the party of managed nationalism. What's the chances of either of these things happening? Very, very slim. I'm not telling you what's going to happen. When I say that, I'm telling you what should happen, what must happen if Scotland is going to be saved. That is what must happen. One or both, preferably all of the nominally pro-independence parties needs to become more radical. They all do. And that means Scottish UDI, because there's nothing else. I'll see you on Sunday. Bye.